So the final UFC event of the year, UFC Fight Night Tampa, is officially in the books, which means that it is time for me to give my full card post-fight recap and analysis. We will discuss every single fight on the card, starting with the main event, working our way down to the very first fight of the evening. But guys, my initial thoughts of just this entire card from top to bottom, it had a little bit of everything, right? Which that to me makes a fun and exciting card. We had some good back and forths. We had some guys in some flow state. We had a fraud getting exposed. We had some controversy. This card had absolutely everything. I really enjoyed this one. I thought that this was a good fight night to end the year. But let's waste no more time. Hop right into this, starting with the main event of the evening between Joaquin Buckley and Colby Covington. Now, this fight was playing out very much how I was expecting, right? I thought Joaquin Buckley was going to be able to get a finish in this fight. Now, we do have a little bit of controversy, right? Because there was a cut over the eyelid of Colby Covington. There's the stoppage, which to me, this is something that kind of plays into the character of Colby Covington, the character, right, of Colby Covington, to where he's going to be able to say, oh, well, he didn't really finish me. This was a doctor stoppage, and oh, I still had 2 rounds left to work with. I can already see the narratives of Colby Covington and how he's going to spin this and kind of, almost make this almost seem like it never happened. So that is absolutely what he's going to try to do, in my opinion, is he's going to use this to try to somehow, to me, this was, I don't want to say best case scenario considering the situation. It wasn't looking good for Colby, right? He looked flat and, going out there. He looked aged to me. He didn't look particularly great. He did land some good shots at times. He did land some good takedowns. But Joaquin Buckley is just a hungrier guy, right? That's what I talked about coming into this. He's hungry, he's fast, he's powerful, he's dangerous, and he is a guy that is surging inside of the welterweight division, to where Colby, he's kind of got it made in the shade, right? He's kind of been there, done that. He's been around for a while. And this was really, I kept saying all week, I'm like, this is the first time we've seen Colby basically fight a legit contender inside the welterweight division. And Joaquin Buckley fighting at 185, coming down to 170, you just got to see the strength, right? Every time Colby would even take him down, the way that Buckley was able to work back to his feet, the way he was actually able to defend the takedowns pretty well, that was something I thought we were going to see coming into this fight, because whenever you have a big, strong guy like Buckley who has good technique and has developed his game, it's going to spell for a world of problems for a guy like Colby Covington, who's used to being a little bit of the smaller guy, having better technique, maybe being a little bit quicker and putting that volume and pace on you. Colby was just not really able to get going. And yes, that cut happened very early on in the fight, which definitely played an impact in terms of how Colby was probably kind of feeling. And there was a sense of urgency. There's like, you saw him kept touching the cut. That definitely will throw you off. But the bottom line is this. Joaquin Buckley looked outstanding. He looked spectacular. He made Colby Covington look like he's never basically been a high-level fighter. And that speaks to the volumes of how good Joaquin Buckley is inside of this division. I mean, you see here, total strikes 81-71. Joaquin Buckley was able to outstrike him. Colby did land a nice takedown. There was that, triangle submission attempt from Buckley, but the significant strikes here is really where things stood out. Joaquin Buckley 75 to Covington's 37. This really was more or less a one-sided beatdown from Joaquin Buckley. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a few moments from Colby, right? He was able to land, the takedown. He was able to control Buckley a little bit. He did land some good shots on the feet at times. I thought Colby was throwing a good right hook with a left hand down the middle. That was actually landing. To me, Colby looked right? I don't think that he looked completely washed and that he was nowhere near vintage Colby, right? And I know he's 36 years of age. He's got, he's made a bunch of money. That's what I said. I questioned the hunger kind of coming into this. Took the fight on short notice, right? I'm saying there's a lot of excuses that Colby has to work with here because he really didn't get finished, right? And I know that, yes, this is a TKO doctor stoppage, and he was taking a lot of damage. Joaquin Buckley was letting some nasty shots to the body, then was coming back upstairs, and that's what I've said before. You can say whatever you want about Colby. The guy is durable, he's tough, and he brings it every single time, and you got to see that, right? That cut was nasty, and people are going to say, like, Dana's up there, oh, if that's in Vegas, this fight doesn't get stopped. I find that hard to believe, right? Anytime you have a jagged cut, especially over the eyelid, I knew exactly when Brendan Fitzgerald said on the broadcast, he's like, when they stand this thing up, I think Dan Mergliana is going to take a look at it. There was just blood everywhere on Joaquin Buckley on the canvas from that one little cut. I'm like, it looks a little jagged to me. I'm like, this fight's getting stopped. I just knew, especially coming out heading into the third round, I'm like, we're going to need to see some urgency from Colby because this thing's probably going to get stopped. And Colby, he was trying to move forward, right? He came with that high guard. He was trying to put a little bit of a pace on Buckley, but it's the footwork, the speed, that Mike Tyson peekaboo style where he explodes it out of range and lets the combinations fly. He's a problem in this division. He's powerful. He's fast. He's got good movement. I like everything that we saw from Joaquin Buckley last night, and this was a huge win for him, right? And I know Colby took the fight on short notice, and Colby's going to do his little marketing spin and be like, well, he didn't really finish me. It was, the doctor said this. I still had 2 rounds left. Everyone knows I'm good in the later rounds. He hasn't been into the deep water. That's a load of BS. Colby Covington he might have gotten knocked out, right? Let's just call it what it is. He probably at some point might have gotten knocked out in this fight. Even if he came out and had a good 4th and 5th round, Buckley still, was definitely winning the fight. He was landing a ton of damage on Colby Covington. To me, I don't want to say best case scenario for Colby because obviously that's a nasty cut. You're going to have to, get that taken care of. But it leaves controversy, right? And that's a guy like Colby who, loves to spin things and, say a bunch of BS. That's exactly what he's going to do. But the bottom line is this. Buckley looked outstanding. The guy's a real problem in the division. I kept saying he's the dark horse. You could throw him in there against anybody in this weight class, and I think he causes problems. He's, coming down from middleweight down to 170. He's got a great gas tank, crazy power, good speed, very explosive, and the most important thing to me, he has a well-rounded game now. He has the grappling. He has the takedown defense. And when you have a guy like him that is just very athletic and very explosive and you add in all these elements, he's an absolute problem. And this was a big win for him, right? Probably the biggest win of his career. I think the Wonderboy KO was absolutely huge in the way that he ran through Luque. But to go out there against a name in Colby Covington inside this division and put on a performance like that, land so many good shots and defend takedowns and do all those kinds of things, big win for Joaquin Buckley. Main event, his first big opportunity. Great performance by Joaquin Buckley. And for him, he basically was like, I want to hear what the fans want to do. And, he said Kamaru Usman. I think that that's a fight that possibly could be likely next, but maybe they give him a number 1 contender type of fight, right? I know Shavkat Rakhmonov is probably going to be getting the next crack at Bilal Muhammad. Maybe they do Buckley versus some sort of other contender instead of Usman, who, he's a big name, but he's lost a couple fights in a row here. I could absolutely see Buckley possibly getting an Usman fight or maybe a contender like a Jack Della or maybe a Leon Edwards or something of that effect. So again, kind of weird matchmaking going on at 170 pounds because we do have kind of a lot of names all in a similar situation. No question, Joaquin Buckley has thrown his name into the hat for getting a title shot here very soon. He's been unbelievable at welterweight. This was a great performance. He dominated Colby Covington. Like I said, Colby had a few moments. It was impressive that he was able to take Buckley down and control him because we haven't seen that since Buckley's fought down at 170. So credit to Colby there, but absolutely a dominant win for Joaquin Buckley. Very impressive performance by Numancia. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening, we have Cub Swanson and Billy Qurantillo. And I did pick Buckley to win that fight. And then this one, Cub Swanson. I went with the underdog in this. I was like, look, Cub Swanson, he's a savage. I know he's in his 40s, but this is one of those dudes that every time he goes out there, I think it was Joe Rogan said, if you see a silhouette of Cub Swanson, you just know that, like, just the silhouette, you know that that's Cub. The way he fights, his style is very unique to Cub. And, man, every time he goes out there, you know that you're in for a fun fight. And it just, every time I think of Cub Swanson, I think of the Choi fight and just the great back and forths, that legendary scrap. And every time we see Swanson, it seems like we're seeing some type of banger. I mean, this guy, he's an absolute legend of the sport. To be 40-some years of age and go in there against a guy in Billy Q. Billy Q's, he's pretty good, right? He's a pretty well-rounded guy. He was in, his hometown in Tampa, Florida. He was all riled up. And I was like, look, I think Cub Swanson gets a finish here because I think Billy Q, while he's good, he likes to, mix in the grappling. He does have some good striking. He leaves himself vulnerable in the boxing defense. And if you go out there against Cub, who, he does, keep his hands a little low, and you could possibly find some shots and get Cub out of there. I just thought the power, on the side of Cub Swanson was going to be too much for Billy coming into this fight. And turns out that was exactly the case, because you can see the striking totals here. I mean, this was a, pretty good back and forth, right? This was an outstanding scrap, between these two. And, 3 takedowns from Billy Q. Cub Swanson was able to work his way back to his feet, but 114 to 108. But this is really what's crazy to me is crazy back and forth significant strikes. Both guys were landing good shots. Billy Q, good knees, good shots up the middle. Cub Swanson, that missile right hand that ultimately led to that crazy knockdown. I mean, that he threw just a nice left hook and a boom, a right hand from hell right down the middle, was able to drop Billy Qurantillo, get him out of there. Unbelievable performance by Cub Swanson. And he goes on the mic and says, that I told my wife that's probably the last one. So is this the last one? Maybe, right? We've seen guys say that, and then they actually do come back for another one. And Dana in the post-fight presser is like, look, if he wants to retire, great. But if he wants another one, I'm all for it. So Cub Swanson, if he retires and that's it, what an absolute legend. Guy's an absolute savage. Every time he goes out there, you know that you're in for a fun scrap. But if he does have another one in him, I think the UFC should give him someone that's a little bit older. Don't give him some young, hungry, up-and-coming guy, but give him a fun back-and-forth scrap with someone that can make for a fun fight. Maybe he goes up to 55 and takes on Michael Johnson. I don't know, something like that. But, Cub Swanson, absolute savage. Love watching the guy fight. Great performance by Cub. Moving on. This was one of the best performances of the year, right here between Manel Kape and Bruno Silva. I expected Manel Kape to go out here and win this fight. And for me, it just came down to, look, one of the big critiques that I've had with Manel is, are you going to open up? Are you going to be aggressive enough? Are you actually going to live up to your potential? Because I think Kape, I've always said, he is one of the best flyweights in the world. And when it comes to the striking, when he's on like he was in this fight, I mean, he was in a flow state for 15 minutes. I don't think we've ever, or as long as the fight lasted, almost 15 minutes, he was absolutely spectacular. He was flowing, switching stances, throwing shots from different angles, mixing the combinations together. The defense was on point, the reactions. This was a vintage performance by Manel Kape, and it was absolutely spectacular. I thought this was one of the best performances of the year, because Bruno Silva, he's dangerous. Coming into this fight, inside the flyweight division, we don't necessarily see a ton of KOs, right? We do from time to time. Bruno was one of those guys. He came into this starching people, getting people out of there, and you saw him in there. He came out in that third round swinging for the bleachers. He's like, look, I know I'm behind against Kape. He's fast. He's stinging and moving. He's in that flow state. I'm going to have to just swing and see if something can land to get this guy out of there, because if this goes to the judges' scorecards, I'm definitely losing a decision. So credit to Silva for coming out and trying to leave it all on the line, but eventually it was just the speed, the cat-like reflexes of Manel Kape that were just a real issue. And that Manel that showed up last night is absolutely one of the best flyweights in the world. My critiques have always been, he never opens up enough. He's never aggressive enough at times. Well, I shouldn't say never, but when he is, that's how good he is. And that's why I'm like, Manel, just open up, throw strikes, trust the combinations, trust the instincts, because, you see here, 111 to 60 in terms of the striking total, significant strikes, 111 to 57. I mean, absolutely spectacular performance by Manel. And then he says, I want a title shot. You're not getting a title shot after that, right? You went out there against, Muhammad Makayev. You lost the fight. And then so it's just, there's been, some things where I think the UFC is like, look, yeah, you went out there and put on a great performance, but you're so hot and cold with putting on performances like this. So I think if Manel can go out there, they'll probably give him a top 5 guy at this point. If he could go out there, put on a great performance, get a big win, I could see him in a title opportunity in the near future. A fight that sticks out to me, I would love to see Manel Kape versus a Brandon Moreno or a Brandon Royval. Give him one of the better strikers in the division. Book a fun matchup. Don't give him someone that's just going to try to take him down the whole time, because I believe Manel Kape, skill-wise, in terms of the striking, just might be the best in the division. I mean, you got to see it last night. The switching of stances, mixing the kicks, the boxing, the defense. He was absolutely off the hook last night. I mean, I'm just giving him his props, because it was truly one of the most entertaining performances of the year to watch. I mean, and it was a year full of a lot of great performances. The flow state, just the way he was flowing and the variety. Absolutely spectacular. Great performance by Manel Kape. Although I don't think he gets the title shot. Again, I think he's going to have to show a little bit more to the UFC, considering he has been so hot and cold. Great performance by Manel Kape. Maybe they even do a trilogy with Kai Asakura, right? I know Asakura, he's in the rankings and he just lost to Pantoja, but him and Kape are 1-1. Maybe that's a fun fight that they look to put together. So I could see that. Either way, outstanding performance by Manel Kape. He was in the flow state. I mean, that was just, I don't have enough nice things to say, man. That was absolutely spectacular. Or I have too many nice things to say, I should say. All right, moving on to light heavyweight. We have Vitor Petrino versus Dustin Jacoby. This was a fraud exposure. And this was my fear for Vitor Petrino coming into this fight. Dustin Jacoby, you can't sleep on this guy. I know he went out there and got KO'd by Dominic Reyes, but Dustin is a former Glory kickboxer, right? And I know he's not a guy that's known for crazy power, but you got to see, I've said it so many times, guys. Basically, everyone has power. They do. It's just a matter if you dig your feet in, sit on your shots, and plant and really twist. And you got to see. Look at what Dustin Jacoby just did last night. Absolutely flatlined Vitor Petrino. And one of the critiques I had of Vitor coming into this fight, yes, he's a big, powerful guy. Yes, he does a pretty good grappling with good submissions, but the footwork, the elusiveness, and just the IQ when it comes to the striking of Dustin, I figured was going to be a little bit of a problem for Vitor. However, the power of Petrino, there's no question. When he was landing on Jacoby, you got to see Jacoby's like, okay, I gotta be careful. I gotta get in and out of range. I can't just sit there and get hit by these shots. Otherwise, he's probably gonna put me out. But this is back-to-back losses for Vitor Petrino, and both by finish. He got submitted by Anthony Smith, which again, Anthony Smith, yeah, he's a big name and he's had a pretty good career, but this is like the down the line Anthony Smith, the guy that is very aged. He's not the same dude. And then you go out there against an aging Dustin Jacoby, who, in all fairness to Dustin, he's been out there against some really good competition. He's had some close fights with Alonzo Menafield, who's an absolute powerhouse, a close fight with Khalil Roundtree, to where I actually thought Jacoby was able to outpoint him and win that fight, even though Khalil Roundtree got the decision. But Jacoby's a stud. He's a sniper. He's very accurate. I mean, you see here, he outstruck Vitor Petrino 47-40, landed 45-40 significant strikes, and then the absolute missile of a right hand down the middle. Two missile right hands on the main card. One from Swanson, one from Dustin Jacoby. That was probably the biggest win in Jacoby's career. I mean, not only to beat a young prospect and a powerhouse in Vitor Petrino, but to go out there in the third round and land just sit on a perfect right hand and sleep his ass. Absolutely spectacular. Great win by Dustin Jacoby. Again, his striking IQ, the footwork, the willingness to not let the ego get in the way and just sit in the phone booth and slug with a big young guy like Vitor. Great performance by Dustin Jacoby. What's next for him? I mean, I don't know. I think that he should get maybe a ranked opponent next. He went out there, he lost to Dominic Reyes, but you go out there and you take on this young prospect in Vitor Petrino, who one of my critiques for Vitor doesn't pull the trigger enough, right? You saw it against Tyson Pedro. He should have been able to KO Pedro, right? That ended up being Tyson's last fight, and Vitor is just too hesitant. He sits on the outside and taunts and but he doesn't get in the range and try to land anything, right? He throws shots in singles. That's not enough when you're going to face a very technical kind of maestro in there in Dustin Jacoby. Vintage performance by Jacoby, probably the biggest win of his career. That was outstanding. Moving on to the bantamweight division, Adrian Yanez versus Daniel Marcos. So this fight went very much how I was expecting it. I thought that the variety of Daniel Marcos was going to give Adrian some problems. And, Yanez is one of those guys where it's like, look, he has outstanding boxing. He's got very crispy hands. He's got good power, good speed, really good timing. His understanding for boxing is one of the best in the UFC, without question. But I thought if there was a guy in this division who's on the rise, a guy like Daniel Marcos, who has the leg kicks, has the knees, has the versatility and the overall skill set, that was going to be troubling for Adrian coming into this fight. And that's what you got to see. I mean, whoever scored this 30-27, I mean, they should be relieved. I mean, that was absolutely crazy. I mean, this fight to me was probably, I think I had it scored, 2 rounds to Marcos. Yanez, I think, took one in there. But to give them all to Marcos, I thought was absolutely crazy. Very, very good back and forth here. Marcos landed some really good shots. He got Yanez's respect very early on in the fight by landing some good shots with the hands. Started landing some kicks, mixed into takedowns. Great performance by Daniel Marcos. And look, You talk about Adrian, he's a guy that, he's fun to watch. Like, I know that he's not, maybe a huge name, but he's got a fun style. He's definitely someone the UFC is hoping can find a way to win fights. But Daniel Marcos, guy's on an absolute tear. He's a stud in the division. He's got a very well-rounded skill set. But I figured the way that he was going to mix everything together was going to cause some problems for Adrian coming into this fight. I mean, you see, it was a good back and forth, right? 95 to 85 in terms of the strikes. The takedowns were definitely a factor from Marcos, and then 86 to 79 in terms of the significant strikes. Very good back and forth. This was one of my favorite fights on this card to end the year. Great back and forth. Daniel Marcos, I've been saying it. Guy's underrated. Guy's a problem. Start paying attention to him, because to go out there and run through Adrian Yanez like that, that's an impressive performance, because, again, that was a motivated Adrian, right? He needed a win. He's trying to, ever since that Rob Font KO, I feel like he's trying to kind of get his footing again. Big win from Daniel Marcos. Excited to see what's next for him. Moving on to the last fight that was or the first fight on the main card, and that was Navajo Stirling versus Tokkos. So, to me, I had some concerns coming into this for Navajo Stirling. I figured that he was going to win this fight, and I thought that it was going to be by a finish. To me, it's a little bit disappointing that we didn't see a finish. However, I do cut a guy who is making their debut, right? Final event of the year, opening up a it's not a pay-per-view, but it kind of felt like it, right? It'd be a big fight night, last card of the year, had a big energy to it, right? And he goes out there against a guy who did have a little bit of a grappling ability, right? Tuco coming into this was definitely going to be a test for Navajo Stirling. Even though Stirling is much better on the feet, he's just a much better overall fighter. We have questions whenever we see a guy who's got outstanding striking that hasn't been tested in terms of the grappling. And that's what I was excited to see in this fight. And what we saw, Stirling's very composed, right? He's got that city kickboxing style. He's got a good jab. He's got a good front kick up the middle, good footwork, good movement. And what I like about him, he's very much on the front foot, right? He's trying to move forward. He's trying to move into range and pressure you and land some good shots to try to get you out of there, where a lot of those other guys from CKB, they kind of sit on the back foot and try to play the pick and poke type of game, where, don't get me wrong, Navajo, he can do that, right? But what we saw, he was very aggressive. You could tell he was looking to find a finish. But whenever you get a guy who just keeps level changing and finding a way, to kind of drag you into that kind of fight, it makes it difficult. But you can see on the striking totals here, 99 to 34. A couple takedowns were landed from Tuco, but then the significant strikes, 78 to 32. It was a good performance by Navajo Stirling, right? This was his first fight inside the UFC. I do want to cut him a little bit of slack when it comes to that. No question. I would have absolutely have loved to see a finish in this. And to me, yes, it is a little bit disappointing that he didn't get a finish here. But what we got to see, he's calm, he's patient, and he is very, very, very good on the feet. He's going to be a problem in this division with experience, with time. I like what we see from Navajo Stirling. I think he's a good fighter. But like I said, would have been nice to see a finish. But either way, dominant victory from start to finish from Navajo Stirling. And I think going in there and getting some real-time grappling reps inside the UFC is going to do wonders for him moving forward. Instead of just going in there with everyone that's just going to stand in front of him to where he can find a KO, this is, I think, a fight that's definitely going to help him in the long run moving forward. Moving on. Featured prelim of the night, Michael Johnson versus Otman Azaitar. So this was a crazy KO for Michael Johnson. And I always say this about Michael Johnson. He's the type of guy who will go out there, lose to somebody who's never fought, and then go out there and KO a champion. Like, that is literally like Michael Johnson to a T. Like, this guy, you just never know what you're going to get from Michael Johnson. He could show up and knock out the best fighter on the planet that night, or he could show up and fight the worst guy on the roster and lose. Like, you just never know what you're going to get from Michael Johnson. But I figured that he was going to win this fight. I didn't think it would be by KO. But, I mean, just the speed, the technicalities, and the way that Michael Johnson, when he is grooving and moving, he's a problem, right? And I know that, he says that he wants some fun fights, and, he's kind of calling out some different names, having some fun there. I'd like to see him try to make a run at it, right? And I'm not saying that he's the best guy in the division, but with Michael Johnson, flip a coin, because whenever he goes in there, he can land great shots on some of the best fighters in the world, right? He's KO'd Dustin Poirier, landed some good shots against Khabib, against Ferguson. Like, that's what I'm saying about this guy. You just never know. And he has a very, very good left hand, and he's got a short, very, very good and tight technical right hook that was able to just brutally put Ottman down. And, you know, whenever you watch Michael Johnson, I figured coming into this fight, look, Ottman's got good power, and everyone's going to say, oh, he can throw a big right hand. Well, guess what? That's been kind of the kryptonite for Michael Johnson. Ottman isn't as fast and as explosive as some of those guys that have been able to land that shot on Michael Johnson, like a Josh Emmett. So I figured Michael Johnson was going to be faster. He was going to be smart in the way he approaches this fight. He was going to be expecting a big looping right hand. And when he sat in the pocket and decided to let the left hand go, but hang in there and throw that right hook, it was an absolute money shot. Great performance by Michael Johnson. And again, this guy's an OG. He's been in the UFC for such a long time. He's been in there with some of the best fighters in the world in the lightweight division. Like I said, he's getting a little bit older. Cub Swanson saying that maybe he wants another one. I know Cub Swanson's a featherweight. I think that would be an absolute scrap. And I know Michael Johnson, yeah, he's a lightweight. I don't think Cub would be necessarily too undersized against Michael in there, and Cub's got great power. They're both good strikers. I just think that's a fun fight for the OGs. I think that would be a good one. But again, Ottman was landing some good strikes, actually landed 20 out of Michael Johnson's 19, but the significant strikes, 19-16 from Michael Johnson. Absolutely spectacular performance by MJ. Went out there, he was grooving. I could tell very early on the movement. He was seeing the right hand, getting out of range, throwing the left hand to the body to try to set it up upstairs. And then once he got Ottman to chase after him, you could tell the game plan was just to bite down, tuck, play defense, and sneak that right hook in there. Outstanding KO by Michael Johnson. And again, you could just flip a coin. You never know what Michael Johnson is going to show up, but if the right one shows up, you know that he can hang with just about anybody in the division. Moving on, Joel Alvarez versus Drakkar Klose. I think everyone under the sun knew, look, Joel Alvarez is probably winning this fight by finish. This guy is an absolutely spectacular fighter inside the lightweight division. And I know he said, maybe I go up to 170 and do this, do that. I hope he stays at 155, right? Because outside of that loss to Arman Tsarukyan, which, by the way, that's not a bad loss, right? That's a guy that's fighting for the title at UFC 311 against Islam Makhachev. You know, outside of that, this dude's spectacular, right? And he really reminds me, you know, I tweeted out last night, I'm like, look, he reminds me of Charles Oliveira, right? And I know that, you know, not the same exact style, not the, you know, the Muay Thai like Oliveira on the feet, but he's got a similar type of feel when you're in there with him, right? It's kind of like a variation of Charles to where he's this tall guy for the weight class, right? And I know that he's much taller, right? He's 6'3". He's got this long frame. He's got dangerous striking on the feet. He just moves forward, gets in your face, and throws nothing but power, and he can absolutely put your lights out. But then you could get rocked on the feet, and then you got to worry because this guy, if he pulls guard and he gets a hold of you, he can submit you from just about anywhere. So that's why I kind of say that he's like a variation of a Charles Oliveira. He just spells danger. When I think of Alvarez, I just think of danger. Just no matter where the fight is, on the feet, on the ground, you are in a world of danger no matter where it goes. And to me, the toughest battle for him at this point is just making the weight, right? He's a big guy for the weight class, and he goes out there against a guy in Drakkar Klose. Klose was streaking, right? He was going in there. He was finding a way to win against everybody the UFC's putting in front of him, kind of making this last push a little bit later in his career here. And you just got to see Joel Alvarez, the speed, the combinations, right? He threw the right hand, stepped forward, landed basically a power jab as he switched stances, threw basically, a nice knee, and then kind of was going for a choke, and Klose was already out. I mean, it was an absolutely spectacular performance by Alvarez, and I hope that at some point in the near future, the UFC will go to Spain, have Topuria headline, put this guy on the card. He is an absolute star in the making. The way that he fights, every single win, I'm pretty sure, is by finish, right? I mean, that is absolutely spectacular. He's knocking people out. He's hurting them on the feet, submitting them, or people are taking him down and he's finding submissions. The guy is absolutely spectacular. And you see 39-16 in terms of the striking. Drakkar Klose did land a nice takedown in there, but Alvarez was able to find a way back to the feet. 20-7 in terms of the significant strikes. Alvarez is a nightmare in this division. Like I said, reminds me of a kind of like Charles Oliveira-esque, to where it's like you got to worry about the striking on the feet, and then you got to be careful because you almost forget about it at times. It's like, oh shit, this guy's dangerous on the ground, got great submissions. I'm not saying he's the same submission threat as Oliveira, but he just kind of reminds me of him in the way that there's just danger absolutely everywhere. Joel Alvarez is a problem. Love watching the guy fight. I figured he was going to find a finish in that matchup. Moving on to featherweight, we had the two The two awkwardly built featherweights, two tall guys for the weight class in Sean Woodson, the St. Louis Sniper, taking on Fernando Padilla. I was surprised we saw a finish, right? I thought that coming into this, we were going to see a decision win. I did think Sean Woodson was going to get the nod, but this was the best performance of Woodson's career, right? And I've said time and time again, he's one of my favorite guys to watch, right? And especially inside the featherweight division, he's got a very unique frame for the division. I mean, he's built really funky, right? He's like a grasshopper. He's got these really tall legs and these long arms, and he's just a very awkwardly built dude, but he boxed at heavyweight, right? He was a big dude, some time ago, and then he's just leaned himself out. And with his reach and the way that he's got a terrific understanding of boxing. He's got very, very slick defense. You saw him up against the fence, Philly shell, rolling, letting shots roll off the guard, rolling underneath. He's got a masterful jab. He will, kind of like he's playing basketball, look up, hit you with a jab, move this way, move his hands all over the place. He is a funky style of fighter. He's a problem in this division. And the fact that he's finding a way, to get a finish over a very dangerous and aggressive guy in Fernando Padilla, absolutely spectacular. So great performance by Sean Woodson from top to bottom. The St. Louis Sniper, he was a sniper last night. I mean, those shots that he landed to get him out of there, I mean, even while Padilla's damn near falling down, Sean Woodson's teeing off landing combinations. I mean, he was just vintage Woodson last night. Outstruck him 30-24, and then 38 significant strikes to 22 of Padilla. Make no mistake about it, Padilla's dangerous, right? He's a guy that moves forward, loves to push the pace. Sean Woodson's a problem, right? With his build, he's got good takedown defense. He's not the easiest guy to take down. And even if you do, with those long limbs, he's a wiry guy, can find his way back to the feet. But again, the boxing, the striking understanding, and the awkward frame and build of Sean Woodson is going to be troubling for a lot of guys in the division. I think it's time that Sean Woodson gets a ranked opponent, somewhere between 10 and 15, I think would be perfect next. A name off the top of my head, I don't know. Give him a striker. Give him someone that's fun. Give him an opportunity to start climbing the rankings. I like watching this guy fight. I think he's one of the best boxers in the sport. I think that from top to bottom, he's a guy that's just really finding the groove. Love me some Sean Woodson, man. Absolutely spectacular performance. Moving on, Felipe Lima versus Miles Johns. So I was surprised this went the distance, right? I thought Felipe Lima was going to be able to find a submission in this fight, but make no mistake about it, this was a great performance. Felipe Lima, he's one of those guys that I said coming in, I'm like, look, this guy's a real deal, right? He's got good striking. He's got outstanding submissions. He's got good grappling. And overall, when you look at a prospect that's on the rise, that's what I'm looking for, is someone that's not, exactly one-dimensional. You could be a specialist, right? And I would say Felipe Lima, he's kind of a submission specialist, right? He is very, very dangerous when it gets to, when the fight hits the floor. He can grab onto a limb and sub anybody from anywhere. So I figured that he was going to be able to find that against an aggressive Miles Johns, but we saw how good Miles Johns is as well, right? He's a tough guy. He's got good power. He's a well-rounded guy himself. But Felipe Lima, I mean, he's just well-rounded. He's got good striking. He's got good speed. And the versatility that this guy has is going to make him a problem inside this division. And like I said, he has the submissions in his back pocket. So he can stand on the feet with just about anybody, and he feels comfortable because he's like, what are you going to do? Take me down? Because if you do, you better be careful. I'll snatch onto a limb and find a way to get you out of there. So nonetheless, Felipe Lima, guy's dangerous. Like watching him fight. I think he's one of the best prospects on the rise in this division. I'm excited to see what's next for him because, again, he's new. He's young in the UFC. And to get a name like Miles Johns, a guy who's, pretty good in the weight class, a guy that's been, he's been around, right? He's got good power. He's got some pretty good grappling. Very impressive win by Felipe Lima. And while I expected a finish to go the distance, get those minutes in there with a guy like Miles Johns, I think is only going to help Felipe moving forward. Very, very good performance from top to bottom. Almost done here. Miranda Maverick versus Jamie Lynn Horth. So I figured Miranda Maverick was going to win this fight by decision. And that's kind of how the fight played out. And I saw Miranda Maverick posting all over social media. She's like, look, that was a horrible performance. Even though I won, I'm treating it as if I lost. And, she's being hard on herself. But I also think that there's some truth to that, right? Because Jamie Lynn Horth, she's got an awkward build for the weight class, right? She's tall, she's big, she's a tricky opponent, right? But Miranda Maverick, she's someone who's young, someone that's made a lot of changes in terms of, her style. She's got good movement, good footwork. And, back to the Macy Barber fight, right? People kind of thought that she won that fight. She's been on a streak here. She's really showed great improvements. But in this fight, it almost looked like, I don't want to say she took a step back, but she didn't show all of the nuances that she's added to her game, right? The footwork, the timing, the movement, the striking to set up the takedowns. And she found herself in some tough positions here, right? She got outstruck by Jamie Lynn Horth, which I know Jamie is, Jamie Lynn, she's tall. She's got that awkward frame. So sometimes getting on the inside when you're the shorter opponent like Maverick, it can be a little bit difficult. You are going to eat some of those long straight shots in order to get inside. So it is kind of normal at times to get outstruck by an opponent that is a little bit longer. But I think the expectations from Miranda are high. People are like, look, she should go in there and just kind of run through Jamie Lynn Horth. Horth's not a bum. She's a good fighter. And, she got outstruck there, landed 2 takedowns to Jamie Lynn Horth's 1, and then the submission attempt by Jamie Lynn Horth was definitely something there as well. And then 24-15 in terms of the significant strikes. So I understand why Miranda's being hard on herself, but at the end of the day, a win is a win. It may not be the most beautiful. It may not be the most spectacular. It may not be the most fun, but guess what? You still won. So when you're winning, you're going to stay on the roster probably, unless you're ungodly boring, right? Which I don't think she's ungodly boring. So she's putting herself in a good position by getting a win. I've been watching Miranda for a very long time, right? I saw her before she got to the UFC fight for Shogun Fights. She has made tremendous improvements from top to bottom in terms of the grappling, the striking, the footwork. I would just like to see her be a little bit more aggressive, like I said, a little bit more aggressive. Like I said, I think the length of Horth gave her some issues. All right, moving on to the bantamweight division. Davy Grant versus Ramon Taveras. What I tell you, man, about Davy Grant, this guy is just, he's just incredible, right? He's getting up there in age. I call him Old Man Davy. He goes in there. Look, he's got outstanding versatility with the striking. He's got good footwork, good speed, good movement, can switch stances. Crazy variety when it comes to the kicks. Throws them upstairs, to the body, to the leg, the oblique kicks. And he just kept Ramon guessing, right? Ramon's got good boxing. He's got good power. And I figured if he was going to win for Ramon, he was going to have to win by finish. Because if you're in there with Davy Grant, he's always going to be in, and every time he takes on a prospect in the division, he finds a way to lose by split decision, right? That's kind of what it's been for Davy Grant. But in this one, he was just ahead of Ramon the entire fight, right? He did not let Ramon get the boxing going. And the way that you do that is you attack the legs, right? You just mix in the kicks. You keep them at, the end of your strikes. You keep them at range. Exactly what Davy Grant did. This was a masterful performance from Davy Grant, and a guy that he's been away for a while, right? Had the the injury, the neck, I think it was he had the scare with the injury. He's able to find his way back here. Vintage Davy Grant, outstanding performance, outstruck him 147-69, and then significant strikes 147-69. Absolutely spectacular performance by Davy Grant, a guy that to me, he looked like he was aging in reverse because Ramon's a dangerous opponent. He's kind of new on the scene in the division. He's got big power, good boxing, but with Davy Grant, with the speed, the versatility, the way that he mixes everything together in terms of the striking, dude's absolutely spectacular. And he's been in there going neck and neck with some of these, dangerous prospects in the division. And like I said, losing by split decision. So he is right there with some of, the top guys in the division. So I like Davy Grant. I'd like to see him make a little bit of a run here. Great performance. This was an absolute one-sided beatdown, in my opinion, against Ramon Taveras. And like I said, Davy Grant with the versatility, the way he mixes things up, you're going to have to go in there and probably knock him out or land some dangerous shots that really rock him because, it's going to be hard to outpoint him, right? The volume, the versatility, hard guy to deal with. Great performance by Davy Grant. Last but not least, the first fight of the night between Josephine Knutsson and Piera Rodriguez. This was a very disappointing performance, in my opinion, from Josephine. Look, I know Piera Rodriguez, she got overlooked coming into this. She's someone that, she was on a little bit of a skid. She's got good grappling. She's got good ground and pound. This was a fight, to me, where Josephine should have came in and won this, right? And I know that she has good striking and she's got, the kickboxing background. I expected more from her in this. Look, you knew Piera was going to try to take you down. Her takedown defense looked atrocious, but nonetheless, great performance by Piera. The way she was able to just move forward, take her down. I mean, you see this here, 85-67 in terms of the strikes. She landed some good shots on the ground, some vicious elbows, 8 takedowns, very impressive. And then 36-26 in the significant strike ratio there. Great performance by Piera. Don't want to take anything away from her. I was just shocked, right? I was shocked at how bad the takedown defense of Josephine was. And even on the feet, Piera was landing some good, dangerous shots in the pocket that were kind of, keeping Josephine guessing. Then she would take her down. Great performance by Piera, the way she was able to control her, land some good ground and pound from the top. When she got in the full mount and was starting letting the elbows fly, I thought that maybe we could get a stoppage in there. But nonetheless, dominant win by Rodriguez. Disappointing from Josephine. She was a prospect that has a fun style. I think the UFC was trying to give her a good matchup here to try to, help start building her inside the division. Nonetheless, it was just, like I said, disappointing. Zero takedown defense. She's got a lot of work to do. To me, it kind of reminded me of Cesar Almeida, right? This fun, striking style kickboxer comes in there, zero takedown defense. Great performance by Piera. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, comment your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.